unboxing of the David Bowie Divine Symmetry box set, which is effectively the 50th anniversary edition of Hunky Dory. So there we have a picture from the Hunky Dory session on the front. It says Magnificent Outrage on the back and Divine Symmetry on the spine. This is very similar to the Conversation Piece box set, with the exception that this and the following box set, Rock and Roll Star, both have an additional booklet, which we'll look at momentarily. Here's the book itself, with, again, some more alternate pictures from that Hunky Dory album cover photo session. The discs themselves each come in their own individual wallet that replicates, or rather has a picture of some of the outtakes of the back cover from the Hunky Dory session. And this book has quotes from David Bowie, a timeline, contemporary reviews and articles, lots of pictures, pictures of acetates and tape boxes, etc., and then a track-by-track rundown of everything that's on here, when it was recorded, who performed on it, who produced it, etc., etc. This box set contains a variety of recordings from 70 to 71, including BBC sessions, a show from Friars Aylesbury, and alternate takes of tracks that are on Hunky Dory, as well as a disc of demos, which all the box sets have seemed to have except the width of a circle. Press releases. Notes from Ken Scott. It contains the original notes that were in the 5 years box set for Hunky Dory, as well as new notes about some of the additional mixes that were done for this specific set. And we have our credits at the back. And we have the additional 3 discs back here. This is disc 3. Disc 4. And then disc 5, which is a Blu-ray. And all the discs have the same general format on them, with the RCA style disc, but Bowie's name there instead. They're just each a different color. So that's the main book with the discs in it. In addition, we get this smaller perfect bound book, which is a composite of some of David's notebooks from the period. So there's lyrics in here, set lists, costume design illustrations, there's even some recording details in here, etc., etc. Very interesting inclusion. It says at the back that these are a composite of 4 of his notebooks, and that the pages have been increased by approximately 50% to fit within the box. Chord charts. Interesting. I will admit that although this is interesting, most of his handwriting I can't read. So my interest in this is limited, but as kind of a historical document, it's certainly an interesting idea to include it. That is the Divine Symmetry box set, and here is the sheet from the back that just has the track listing as well as an overview. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. I'm Brandon Ware. You're watching Angel65, my channel for all things music related, music reviews, as well as my own music posts, and today we are talking about Divine Symmetry, The Journey to Hunky Dory. There are 5 CDs in this set, as well as a Blu-ray audio, 4 CDs, 5 discs total, and they contain a variety of BBC sessions, concert recordings, alternate mixes, and takes of things that are on the Hunky Dory album. The Blu-ray itself contains the remastered Hunky Dory, as well as some additional tracks, and we also get some songwriting demos. Overall, Hunky Dory is one that I'm still really close to. That is actually the first full-length album that I ever bought by David Bowie, so it's the first full-length studio album I ever heard, start to end. And I certainly love the quirkiness of it. I absolutely love Rick Wakeman's playing on it because, hey, as a prog guy, keyboard legends don't get much bigger than Rick Wakeman, now do they? So I enjoy Hunky Dory. I certainly don't like it as much as The Man Who Sold the World. And in general, the Spiders are... I won't go so far as to say they're overrated. I know this is a highly revered period, and this is the period where he's starting to get the commercial success that he wants. But overall, I don't think the Spiders were as musically accomplished as some of the people he would have. I certainly think Mick Ronson was. He was a fantastic guitarist and did most of the orchestral arrangements on both this and the Ziggy Stardust album. But overall, I don't think that he's as good a guitarist as Bowie later had. Earl Slick and Carlos Alomar, I think, are much better players. I think George Murray is a much better bass player than Trevor Bolder. And I think he had some far, far, far superior drummers to Woody Woodmansey, who is just a basic 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of rock drummer. He's got some character to his playing, and perhaps I would like it more if I enjoyed the sound of it. So we'll start there with the sound of the original Hunky Dory album, because while there's remixes here, there's no official full-length remix of the original Hunky Dory album using the original takes, which I think is a missed opportunity on this set, because I'm going to be completely honest here. I think all 4 of the albums that Bowie made with Ken Scott sound like shit. They just do not sound good. The drums sound thin and like cornflake boxes. There's notes that were taken from 5 years that are reproduced in the book to this box set about how Woody Woodmansey said his drums sounded like cornflakes. So to prove his point, Ken Scott literally set up cornflakes as the drum set and showed that they don't sound like that. Okay, no they don't, but they still sound incredibly thin. Ken Scott admits he was not into using the room mics to capture the cymbals, and as a result you get barely any cymbals on these albums. The guitars, especially the acoustic guitars, sound paper thin. They have absolutely no depth or resonance to them whatsoever, which is a shame because there's a lot of great acoustic guitar work on this, particularly Song for Bob Dylan and Andy Warhol and Quicksand and Kooks, and yeah, there's a lot of really cool acoustic guitar stuff on Hunky Dory, and I just think it sounds very poor. Very poorly recorded, almost no character or body to those guitars whatsoever. And this is a problem that is even worse on Ziggy Stardust, which we'll talk to when we get to the Rock and Roll Star box set. I say all 4 of them sound like shit. Actually, Aladdin Sane sounds pretty good. I mean, it sounds light years better than either Hunky Dory and especially Ziggy Stardust, which I think is one of Bowie's worst sounding albums, not because the music on it is bad, but just because I do not like the mix and I do not like the EQing that was used on it. Very shame, and it's surprising when you consider that Ken Scott is considered one of the best producers of the period, one of the great engineers of the late 60s, early 70s, engineered a bunch of the Beatles recordings, etc., etc. But I'm sorry, the sound of these albums just does not appeal to me. I think they sound thin. They don't sound like rock albums. They don't even sound like pop albums. They just sound thin. I've always thought that was the case, and especially hearing it in high resolution, you almost don't realize how bad these mixes are till you hear them in the highest quality they can possibly be and think, wow, they really should sound better than that. I would almost love to hear Visconti have a crack at this, just to see what he could do with it, even though he obviously wasn't involved in the creation of any of those albums. Okay, now that that's out of the way, sound aside, I do enjoy the songs on Hunky Dory. I think it is an interesting album. It's called his portfolio album in a way, and I suppose that's fair because all of the songs on it are very different, and they're sort of an update to the same writing style that he exhibited in the late 60s, but more character to the songs, more charisma. And it's also the official start of the Spiders period, though of course they weren't yet named the Spiders, which again, good backing band, not great. I think Bowie would play with some much better musicians later in his career. I'm just being honest. People are probably going to hate me for that, but I'm just saying how I feel about it. Because one of the things that I've always loved about Bowie is his musical versatility, and I feel like that comes across better when he has better musicians playing with him. The by far the most accomplished musician to play on Hunky Dory in any capacity is Rick Wakeman. Of course it is. He's a virtuoso. No surprise there. Anyway, I still like the album, so I thought it would be worth checking this out to hear the development of it. So what kind of stuff do you get on here? You get the songwriting demos, again, similar to what was in the Conversation Piece box set, although these are much higher quality. There's 2 San Francisco recordings, literally recorded on a portable tape recorder, of Waiting for the Man and an early version of Quicksand. There's demos for a lot of songs that did not make the album: Tired of My Life, Shadow Man, How Lucky You Are, King of the City. Stuff that did make the album: Song for Bob Dylan, Quicksand, Queen Bitch, Kooks, Life on Mars. And then there's 2 bonus acetate dubs, which are Changes and Bombers. Those don't sound particularly good. It sounds like the acetate discs have degraded, which it mentions in the notes, and so they just did the best they could to record it and restore it to the degree that it was possible. Interesting demos, certainly not a buying point for me. They're not as interesting as the home demos that were on Conversation Piece, because those songs were a lot more acoustic oriented anyway. And so, excuse me, they kind of sound good in that format. Whereas this, it's like when you hear these demos, you hear embryos of what would ultimately become the finished songs, but many of them are still in a very much in a state of flux. Others are closer to the finished version, but none of them sound as good as the finished version, even though I don't think the album Hunky Dory sounds good. Second CD, we get BBC Radio in Concert, John Peel. So this is David Bowie and friends, and so he has some people come and perform with him. Mick Ronson is there. What else do you get? Dana Gillespie does vocals on Andy Warhol. George Underwood does, is it George Underwood, I think, does the vocal on Song for Bob Dylan or something on here. Mostly acoustic versions. There's a mono and stereo mix. The stereo mix is missing 2 tracks. I'm always interested in BBC stuff. BBC stuff is always a buying point for me when I look into these box sets. So that was very interesting. It wasn't the coolest session ever. The other one on the box set is much better, but still cool. Speaking of, CD3 contains the second BBC session, which is Sounds of the 70s, Bob Harris. And this is David Bowie and Mick Ronson together, mostly playing acoustics and just doing duo versions of The Superman, Oh You Pretty Things, 8-Line Poem, Kooks, Fill Your Heart, Amsterdam, Andy Warhol. Then the rest of that disc is a full cassette concert from Friars Aylesbury, and this was one of his first live performances in like a year or so. One of his first performances with Mick Ronson and the band that ultimately became the Spiders. Sounds not the highest sound quality, but it's a historically significant gig because it was one of his first in a long time, because gigs for him were rare at that point, and it just shows him getting more confident through. So it's a very similar set list to what was on the in-concert BBC recording that was on the Width of the Circle set covering the previous year, though you do get some, again, demo, almost finished versions of what would become the Hunky Dory album, including Changes, Oh You Pretty Things, 8-Line Poem, Andy Warhol, etc., and Waiting for the Man, which is one he does a lot, cover of the Velvet Underground, which Velvet Underground is not a band I'm remotely interested in, and I don't think that's a great song, so I get pretty sick of hearing that every time he does it live. But other than that, definitely an interesting part of the set, certainly a buying point for me. CD4 is where things get more interesting in terms of the development of the album itself, because we get the Bow promo mixes, which I guess were re-released, I don't know, 6-7 years ago on a vinyl for Record Store Day or something like that. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they came out in that format. But you get 6 mixes that were released commercially, and that included Bombers, which didn't make the final album. This also includes Oh You Pretty Things, 8-Line Poem, Kooks, Queen Bitch, and Quicksand. Alternate mixes that are not what was on the final album. You get some outtakes from the Hunky Dory sessions, Lightning Frightening, the early mix of Amsterdam, which went unreleased, and then the released version of Amsterdam, which came out as a B-side to, I don't remember which single. The Changes mono version, the Andy Warhol version, all of that is on the 5 Years box set, though Andy Warhol does contain the full intro that is not on the single version in the 5 Years box set. And then we get the Life on Mars 2016 mix, which is interesting because there's no drums. It's very stripped back and features mostly just the orchestra and Bowie. And then we get 2021 mixes, so alternate mixes that are maybe a little punchier than the original, and these are mostly the same takes, but just different sound, a little bit different EQ, and also includes some stuff that's alternate takes, alternate vocals, alternate sax, such as on Changes. You get the original ending version of Life on Mars, and there's a discussion of how that happened in the book. So I guess they were running the tape, finishing the take they liked, and after that they could hear the bleed through of a previous take that they recorded over with a phone ringing in the background, and they wanted to keep it because they thought it was funny, but ultimately it got edited for the album as it fades out because Mick Ronson was swearing, getting all frustrated and stuff. Bombers, Song for Bob Dylan, Bewley Brothers, yada yada yada. And then the Blu-ray is really the heart of the box set because it includes the 2015 remaster and high resolution, which certainly sounds better than the CD that's in the 5 Years box set and my LP copy of it, which is taken from the same master. Definitely sounds better than that. Still doesn't make it sound like a great album, or a great sounding album, rather. You get a Divine Symmetry. This is an alternative journey through Hunky Dory. So this is a combination of the Bow promo mixes and the 2021 remixes put together back in the same track order. So basically just an alternate album version of Hunky Dory, not unlike what was done on the King Crimson box sets with alternate albums and etc. You get that Life on Mars 2016 mix in stereo and in 5.1. That was really cool. I enjoyed that 5.1 mix a lot. And then that Sound of the 70s Bob Harris session of David Bowie and Mick Ronson that's on CD3 is also included in high resolution on the Blu-ray. So the Blu-ray is basically just the best of the CDs as well as the album itself. Overall, pretty cool track listing, things that are interesting on here. The biggest buying points for me were certainly the BBC sessions and the Friars Aylesbury show. The rest of it, I could do without the demos. Cool to hear, not a buying point. Probably not going to pull those out again. And then the alternate mixes, some of them do sound better than the original or the finished album mixes. But again, I think there was a missed opportunity here where, as was done with Conversation Piece and Metropolis, they could have remixed the entire album using the same takes that were on the master version and done a better job of it, but they chose not to do that. And so that's unfortunate that you do get an alternate version of the album, but it's different takes in places and very different from the original. So they're not taking the original and trying to make it sound better. They're just completely doing a different version of the album entirely, which is fine. Still interesting to hear, but it was a missed opportunity. I personally would have preferred had there been a new 2021 remix of Hunky Dory. I would have enjoyed that a lot more. Overall, do I think this is worth it? If you like this period, then yes, but it's certainly a lot less interesting to me than The Width of a Circle and even the Conversation Piece box set, which I thought provided more insight to Bowie in that transitional period before he moved to his band The Spiders and Ken Scott producing and started really striving for commercial success, which he ultimately did achieve. That transitional period before that is more interesting to me personally. That said, I paid for it. I'm going to keep it. The second missed opportunity is, actually, I guess it doesn't apply to this one. It would apply to Rock and Roll Star, because as far as I know, there's not any visual material that they could have included with this. So the Blu-ray audio, I guess, is fitting. My main aversion to this is probably the price. I believe I paid $70 for it. 4 CDs, a Blu-ray, 2 books. Could have reduced it down to like 50. Would have been a more fair price in my opinion. Or again, could have just made this like a 2 or 3 Blu-ray audio set that just includes the audio, because the truth is, as interesting as some of this stuff is, it's very unlikely that I'll ever go back and pull any of it out on CD again. Some people might, which is fine. I might go back to this and deep dive into Bowie in a few years from now, but I certainly wasn't. It did knock my socks off, let's put it that way. So, because I think the price could have been cheaper, and I think that they should have done a full remix of the master takes on Hunky Dory, I'm going to knock 2 stars off, one for each of those things, and give this a 3 out of 5. If it had been maybe $20 cheaper and it had included a remix of Hunky Dory, then it would get a 5 out of 5. But because of those 2 reasons, I have to knock a star off for each, because I definitely think better box sets can be done and have been done at cheaper price points. So those are my opinions on it. Hunky Dory is an album I like, but if I'm listening to it, I'm probably going to opt for my vinyl copy of it, because as interesting as some of the outtakes and BBC stuff is, it's not interesting enough to merit going back to this particular, like, deluxe version of Hunky Dory on a regular basis. 3 out of 5, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thanks for watching.